human race. We're tracking every move, keeping pace. New waves, new lines, every figure's a key. In the saga of Transformers, our legacy. TFU News and Views, what the story unfolds. And views, news and views. From the spark of creation to the tales untold. Extra, extra. Generations unite in the fans we trust. TFU's got the news, breaking it for us.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to this special edition of TFU News and Views. I am your host, Anthony Brucali, owner-operator, madman behind TFU.info, the website, the Toy Archive, this podcast, Transformers University podcast, and oh so much more. I hope you like the new theme song. I'm experimenting with some stuff for the theme songs on my podcasts, and I want to welcome you to this review of Transformers 1. Now, if you're worried about spoilers, don't worry just yet. I will give you plenty of notice when I talk about spoilers, things I am going to give away in terms of the film, my observations, that sort of thing. But until then, I will only talk about my reaction, my feeling of the film, the way the film works and doesn't work, and it mostly works, and just my overall thoughts on the film without spoiling plot, without spoiling any of the deep parts of this film. Before I do that, I want to give a couple of shout outs. First off, my big shout out to Daryl over at the Transmissions podcast. He hooked me up with getting in touch with the folks that were reaching out to Reddit users, and I'm not really a Reddit user. I am now. I've been playing around with Reddit, and so if you want to find me on there, same name we've been using, TFU.info, all one word. And they hooked me up with an advanced screening. I also reached out to one of my contacts at Paramount Pictures, who also hooked me up on the same advanced screening. And this is about 3 weeks ago. This is the end of August when I got to see Transformers 1. And I will say, if you're wondering about how I feel about this film, and I will sum it up very quickly in saying that I saw it at the end of August, and it opens in another couple of days, and then more broadly opens a week after that. I plan on seeing it again, which is high praise, because I do not necessarily go back and see a Transformers film a second time. I think I did it with the 2007 film, and I think that's it. And I don't even remember if I saw that a second time or not, at least in theaters. I've seen it multiple times since. But this one, I want to go back to the movies and see again. So that should tell you a bit about how I feel about the quality of this film. In addition to seeing this film, the folks at Paramount and the folks at Reddit both had asked me to write a few paragraphs on my feelings, my thoughts on the film. I was kind of hoping to get used in a commercial, in a trailer. I just saw a trailer with a bunch of quotes, and mine are not in there. So I will say that this film, and I will read you this first paragraph I wrote, because it does not feature any spoilers in terms of plot, in terms of any of the character development or anything really specific to the film. What I will say is that it really does say how I felt leaving the theater. Transformers 1 is an epic celebration of the 40-year history of the Transformers brand. It combines portions of the Transformers origin stories throughout the years into a cohesive and adept prequel, while also serving to properly reboot the film franchise. The animation is crisp and beautiful, with tons of Easter eggs in the visuals and in the script. The comedy and performance at times were a bit flat, but this was made up by the overall grandeur of the film. Seeing Cybertron in all of its layers brought to life was incredible. Now, the second paragraph that I wrote does have a lot of spoilers in it, but I will skip ahead and say, this film will subvert your expectations from the trailers. While the trailers will lead you to believe it is wholly a kids' movie, it is not. It is certainly kid-friendly, but there is a depth to this film that I hope will grow this fandom with young people. It has all the elements of wonder that fueled my imagination about Transformers when I was a kid, and I truly believe this has all the makings of a cult classic. It is hands down the best of the 9 theatrical Transformers films to date, including the 1986 movie. And the last thing I wrote was on a card for the folks doing the screening. And this is what I wrote, and I kind of hoped it was going to be in one of those trailers, but it is very simple. This is the Transformers film I've been waiting 40 years to see. And I will say, that is still my general feeling about it. And even rereading this, I brought a smile to my face because so many of those things are true. The first thing that does come to mind is that you may think this is a kid's film, and it is very much a kid's film. But it's not as skewed as young as I thought it was from the trailers. Now, I have a daughter, and she turns 6 next month, and I thought about taking her to this film before I had seen it. Now that I've seen the film, it's still a touch more violent than I'd expect for a kid's film. There's violence that you see, and there's violence that's implied that you don't see. And between those two things, 6 is probably a little young for this. 8 or 9, not so bad, but this is probably aimed straight at like 10-year-olds. 8 or 9, depending on the kid, and as a parent, you should know your kid, what they could handle. I would say this film, probably for them, but at 6, my daughter's probably a little too young for this. I will say, yes, I am giving this high praise. It is the best Transformers movie of all time. And it's funny. I walk out of Transformers films generally thinking they're one of the best of all time. And I've done this with ones that I look back and I'm like, that movie was terrible. I didn't walk out of Age of Extinction feeling that way. I may have walked out of The Last Night feeling kind of that way, but not really. Not thinking it's one of the best, but thinking it was one of the better ones of the Bay franchise. I didn't walk out of Dark of the Moon that way either. But there is a high to walking out of a Transformers film, especially as a Transformers fan. So I'm interested to see what my reaction will be seeing it a second time around. But I'm telling you now, at this point, having not seen it a second time around and being 3 weeks removed from seeing it, it is still the best Transformers film ever made. And I know those of you who love the 1986 film, and don't get me wrong, I'm in that group. I love that 1986 film, but I can also tell you the flaws with that film. That it is a connected series of music videos, much like Rocky IV. That it is built more on the soundtrack than the story, and the story hinges on you knowing and being attached to the characters from watching it as a TV series. This film has none of that. As a friend of mine, Mike Seibert over at the Mike Seibert Radio Podcast put it, it is the most accessible Transformers film of all time. You do not need to know anything about the lore, about the characters, about who becomes what and what becomes who. It's all explained right off the top, and everything else you follow along as you go. So also being a kid's movie, that is great. You do not need to bring in 40 years of history to understand or enjoy this film. You can bring your mom, you can bring your grandma, you can bring whoever to this film, and they'll have a good time. That's the other thing. The film is highly entertaining. It's fun. It's fun to watch. The action scenes are really good. The animation is beautiful and colorful. I know I knocked the performances a little bit. There are times where I felt taken out of the performances because it's voice acting by people who are actors and not voice actors. And I do feel there is a bit of a craft to voice acting that if you don't do it that often, if you don't do it as part of your main job, just being a physical on-screen, on-camera actor doesn't necessarily cut it. And so that's not to say the acting's bad. The acting's far from bad, but there are better performances by various people throughout this film. And then there are some people who all I can hear is their actor and not the character. As I mentioned, there's a lot of Easter eggs, and we'll get into some of those in a little bit. And then I deliberately said the thing about the reboot. I really do feel that this continuity, the Transformers 1 continuity, it lives on its own. It can kind of be your G1 story I guess if Wardon didn't exist. It could kind of be your Bayverse continuity. It could kind of be your Transformers Prime continuity. There's nothing to say this origin isn't like one or the other. What I will say is it pulls from a lot of things. It pulls from a lot of Transformers lore from the 40 years. There are little bits and pieces of things that I noted, and I should probably get my notes ready before we get into spoilers, of all the places it pulled from in this story. And we will do that. In short, and I want to wrap up the non-spoiler part because we're going to get into spoilers after the break. For the non-spoilers, if you are planning to go out and see this film, great. If you weren't planning on going to see Transformers 1, no. Don't miss out. This is something that is not only just really enjoyable, it's great to see with a group of people. It is great to see on a big screen with a big sound system. Don't wait for this to come on streaming. Don't wait for this to be on Paramount Plus. Don't wait for this to be in your own home to see it. It's a good enough film that I feel like, one, you should go see it for the feeling and the spectacle and the way the theater experience enhances a film. And then two, to vote with your wallet. I would have rather seen a film like this in 2007. I would have rather have seen 5 sequels to this than anything we got from the Michael Bay stuff. And that's not to knock the Michael Bay stuff. I think that it has its place. There are certainly great moments in that series, and there are certainly terrible moments within that series of films. But as a 46-year-old G1 kid who's now a G1 middle-aged man, this was the story as a child that 6-year-old Anthony really wanted. And this is the story worth watching just for that. So if you want to feel like you're a kid again, you want to feel enamored with Transformers as a brand and as a lore and as a, let's call it a superhero property, because that's what I generally tend to call it. It is the film to see. And with that, we're going to go to break. And when we come back, we're going to do spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, here's your chance to punch out. If you like this show, please do all the things, like, rate, review, check, whatever it is. Reach out to me on social, TFU.info, all one word, on almost every social media except for the bird. On Twitter, it's TFU_info. I hope you liked this non-spoiler part of the review. If you want the spoilers, stick around. They'll be on right after this.
It is a world transformed, where things are not what they seem. Transformers!
Want to learn a bit about the Transformers? Think you know everything about Cybertron, but are looking to learn a little bit more? Enroll today at Transformers University Podcast. Each episode will tackle a piece of Transformers history, starting in 1984 and marching our way up to today. Hosted by me, Anthony Brucali, 3-time Emmy Award winner and consulting producer on Netflix's The Toys That Made Us, and lifelong Transformers fan. We'll go on a journey through cartoons and comics, toys and movies, and all the weird esoterica from around the world, chronicling the adventures of everyone's favorite robots in disguise. Listen to Transformers University on iTunes, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Transform and roll out!
All right, welcome back. Listen, if you stuck around and still didn't want to be spoiled, or if you're starting to be on the fence and want to change your mind, this is your last chance. I'm going to give you a 3-second countdown, and then we're going to jump into spoilers. So, stand by. If you want to punch out, here's your chance to do it. Hit pause, come back after you've seen the film. This podcast will still be there. Save it on your phone and come back and listen. And then, comment, find me somewhere and tell me if I was right or if I was wrong. And spoilers are going to start flowing in 3, 2, 1. All right, so let me read you the rest of what I wrote to Paramount in my review. There's only really 2 sentences here that were spoilery, but I think it's important because it does set up the whole film. Again, if you wanted to punch out, you should have done it a couple seconds ago, because I'm going to spoil right now, like bad milk. Seeing a proper telling of the Primus origin with the Primes was something I've wanted to see on screen for a long time. Combine that with a way to weave in the quintessons, and you have the best of the two major G1 origin stories. It's like someone putting chocolate in your peanut butter. That was the first part of my second paragraph before I go on about subverting your expectations and whatnot. This film starts right off the bat with the origins of Cybertron, with Primus, with the 13 Primes. You get to see them all on screen throughout the film because there's flashbacks and there's things you see. You see Cybertron off the top. Cybertron exists underground for the most part. The surface level of Cybertron is not somewhere any of the Transformers go as part of their day-to-day, as part of their regular life. Everything on Cybertron, Iacon, everything exists one level down and then further and further and further down into the sub levels of Cybertron. Off the bat, we meet Orion Pax, and Pax is a miner, but we meet him. He is kind of a thief. He is digging through archives looking for, God, what was the thing? See, I have to say my notes are good, but they're not great because it was so dark in that movie theater and we weren't allowed to use our phones. In fact, there were security guards checking to make sure you weren't using your phones. So taking notes was me writing on the back of my TFU.info and Transformer University flyer with a pen that was dying that the Paramount folks gave to me. So my handwritten notes were scribbled. So I'm trying to remember bits and pieces of this film 3 weeks later. It's probably not the best way to do a podcast. But basically, Optimus is looking for the location of the Primes, who are all dead. No, he's not. Optimus is looking for the Matrix, the thing they're always looking for, because the location of the Matrix is very important because the Matrix is, the MacGuffin of the story, and can help give them energon to supply power all of Cybertron. Because guess what the miners are doing? They're mining energon. And Optimus is a miner, as is D16 Optimus. Orion is a miner, as is D16, and they work together in the mines below Iacon. Life is on. We do see a whole bunch of life on Cybertron. We see commuting. We see day-to-day work. We see people taking trains and doing all sorts of things. And then we find out that Alita is Optimus and D16's boss. And they are kind of like a dynamic duo of knuckleheads who do great jobs of getting in trouble and getting other people in trouble. And so much so that they forgot what they do, but they get Alita demoted by accident. And she gets sent to a lower level. There's all sorts of Easter eggs in here. And then eventually there's a whole thing with a race, and I forget what the race is called, but it's kind of like the Speedia 500. It's a race on Cybertron, and they're all doing this to impress the one Prime, Sentinel Prime, who is off on a quest and comes back to Cybertron or something, but he goes off looking for the Matrix. And so, being miners, D16 and Pax can't transform. None of the miners can transform. But Pax gets them into the race with jetpacks, and they don't win, but they lose in spectacular fashion and almost win, and get in some trouble. But they raise their profile enough to be congratulated by Sentinel Prime, and there's a whole bunch of other. But before they get a chance to go and then kind of be these icons that he would like them to be, to keep people working harder in the mines. Dreadwind, the guard, who does not like our two knuckleheads, decides to send them to the lowest possible level, where they meet a bot who has been living by himself by the name of B127. Right, so that's how they meet Bumblebee. Here he's got a whole bunch of, he basically goes through the trash to see if there's anything useful. That's his job. And he builds a bunch of friends that sit around a table and does their voices, and one of them is named Steve. Now, longtime Transformer fans may remember the origins of Steve. Steve has been kind of a Transformer thing since the late 2000s, maybe the early 2010s, with Transformers Prime. I don't know who the person behind it is, but in the fandom, the random Viacons, especially the ones with the worst luck in Transformers Prime, the ones that would have lines but then get beheaded or get destroyed somehow, were referred to as Steve. And this Steve thing is kind of continued on in various Transformers brands. BotBots had a stapler named Steve from accounting, and now Transformers 1 has the not really alive toy that Bumblebee has built as his friend named Steve. And then Steve gets his head knocked off by accident. Turns out there's some vital archival data in there that leads our friends to finding the tomb of the Primes, where they all died fighting the Quintessons, and one Alpha Trion still alive, who they revive, and then Alpha Trion does this great flashback scene. Honestly, the flashback scene might be my favorite part of this film, of the Primes fighting the Quintessons. Actually, I skipped a whole part here, didn't I? I did. They end up on the surface after this with Alita, and they're not allowed to go to the surface. And so they're experiencing the surface on their own, and then they notice Sentinel cutting deals with the Quintessons. Then they find the tomb of the Primes. We get this great flashback of the Primes, and the story continues from there. We find out that all Autobots, all Transformers are born with a transformation cog, and Sentinel has been ripping them out of the miners when they're born. So this makes D16, Megatron, incredibly angry, because Sentinel Prime is like his idol, other than Megatronus, the one Prime. But we get this great flashback scene of the Primes fighting the Quintessons, and then this is where our bots get their transformation cogs from the 13 Primes. They get 4 of them. They don't really tell you who gets what, but they tell you which ones they come from. I believe Megatron's comes from Onyx Primal, and there's a point to this, Onyx Prime, but there's a point to this later on in the film. This, though, creates a stir on the surface. Sentinel Prime and his Viacons show up, and our heroes flee, and Vector Prime sticks around to fight off Sentinel and then ultimately die again. Now our bots are on the run on the surface. They get chased down by Sentinel's crew. They get captured. They end up meeting the elite, the Cybertronian elite guard, which is all of our favorite Decepticons: Shockwave, Soundwave, Starscream, Megatron, D16 fights Starscream. Starscream kind of has this sadist quality to him. Likes getting beat up, but he gets beat up so hard by D16 that it actually destroys his voice, and we get the origin of Starscream's voice problems. Also, Bumblebee gets to talk and does not lose his voice in this film, just so you know. This then leads to a series of Sentinel revealing himself as a traitor, and then our heroes trying to fight them. Optimus ends up leading the Decepticons, essentially the Seekers, and Megatron's forces in an attempt to rescue D16. D16 gets continuously deeper into his hatred for Sentinel, and kind of loses who he is, and that's how Megatron is born. And then we have the big fight scenes throughout the film. Ultimately, D16 kills Sentinel Prime, takes his spark, which we find out was Megatronus's, transformation cog, takes it from Sentinel and installs it in his chest, but then realizes he should rule Cybertron. And then there's the big final fight where they have to stop the new Megatron from taking over the planet, to which he then kills Orion Pax and throws him off the ledge, and he falls into this depths of Cybertron, and he gets the Matrix. The Matrix finds him, essentially. And there was applause in the audience when that happened, by the way. Oh, one other thing I have in my notes here. We'll get to that in a minute. But so that's the story. Then Optimus arises, Optimus Prime, and fights off D16. Megatron defeats him. He and his forces take to the surface, while Optimus, B, and Elita lead the miners' revolt. They get the miners to revolt. They get all transformation cogs. We see a lot of our G1 favorites: Ironhide, Sideswipe, Wheeljack, a whole bunch of others get their transformation cog. And then finally, the film ends with a very much Michael Bay-esque call to action. Optimus calling all Autobots and people out there to protect Earth. That would wrap the film. And I'm really boiling this film down. And man, if you wanted spoilers, you got them, I think, right? Looking at my notes, there are a couple of things that I have here that I didn't touch on. That I just do want to. There's a GoBots joke in there. Some really good Transformers jokes in there. There's a GoBots joke in there. There's a joke in there where Alita says to Pax that you do not have the touch nor the power, which as a throwaway line is fantastic. But if you get it, you get it. I was a little confused at everyone being a minor at first, but it really does work in terms of the storytelling and the birth of the Autobots. There's technogenic life on the surface of Cybertron. I wrote flashback scene of Prime's fighting Quintessons. It was awesome, and it really was. And then there's a scene also where Alita kind of gives Orion the pep talk, and she basically says everything that needs to be said to call him an optimist. And I'm like, she is calling him Optimist Prime without actually saying you are Optimist Prime. Yes, I mean that with the T on it. That is where the film shines, though. This film shines in taking these things that are really very much your expectations of them and kind of giving it to you, but giving it to you in a way that you weren't expecting. Now, as far as like eras of Transformers represented, I made a short list in terms of what where there's crossover to lots of things from various Transformers series over the 40 years. And it's probably not an exhaustive list, but let's just go through them real quickly. G1 cartoon, okay, there's a lot of Orion Pax, the Quintessons. Optimus has his energy axe at one point. These are all things born from the original cartoon. G1 comic, Primus. Primus is straight out of G1 comic. If you didn't know that, now you do. G1 Japan, D16. If you didn't know this was an Easter egg, it is an Easter egg. D16 is the toy numbering designation for Megatron's original toy in the Japanese toy line. Beast Wars. There's a nurse bot in here at one point that looks a lot like Tigatron, and that's probably the closest I can get to straight up plain vanilla flavored Beast Wars in here. But there are other things that do show up. First off, during the race, make sure you read the leaderboard. There are all sorts of famous Transformer names buried in the text there. Beast Machines, technogenic life on Cybertron. On the surface, and then also Viacons. Viacons are something that were born in Beast Machines and then later used in other series like Transformers Prime. Especially these Viacons tend to be more like Transformers Prime Viacons. There are some other ties here too. Steve ties back to Transformers Prime, as does Arachnid, who I didn't even talk about at all. But she is Sentinel Prime's enforcer. And them figuring out her weakness is actually a real key portion to the story and to how our robots, I don't want to say Autobots or Decepticons, our guys lead the revolution on Cybertron. Finally, the last thing from Transformers Prime is very important to me and to a lot of folks, is that the score is by Brian Tyler, and Brian Tyler did the score for Transformers Prime. There are no needle drops in this film. which I think is very important. A lot of films rely very heavily on finding a song that hooks you in, especially coming off of Rise of the Beast, where that film was filled with 90s needle drops, 90s hip hop needle drops at that. And that worked for that film, but the soundtrack became a character as part of the film. And this film didn't need that. And this film didn't need the needle drops. It just needed the epic score and the themes. I would really like to see Brian Tyler just be the modern guy, the Vince DiCola of the modern Transformers media, and being that person that creates all the soundscapes for Transformers. Now, Transformers animated, there was a line towards the end of the film, and I have it written down, so I guess it happened, but I hope my brain isn't like misremembering that it happened, where Megatron says, "Decepticons rise up." We have some IDW reference with Megatron being a miner. That's very important. Bayverse, as I mentioned before, we have the call out from Optimus at the end of the film, just like in every Bayverse and subsequent after Bayverse, Bumblebee and Rise of the Beast. Optimus making that call to action to folks. There's a bit of a tie to Earth spark here with Optimus and Megatron working together. And then finally, real big callback to vintage Bakan. Alpha Trion transforms into a lion, which comes out of, it might even come out of OTFCC comics, that the pun was Alpha Lion. And that's why he was a lion. He was supposed to be a Lio Convoy recolor, and then eventually got a lion figure, and several of them, I believe. But that was all born from convention comics of the early 2000s and late 90s. So like I said, this is a celebration. There's every decade represented here. There's something from every series, it feels like, of Transformers alive and well in this film. So where would I rate it? Like I said, I'd rate this on the scale of Transformers films. And the more I'm talking about it, I'm like, man, I can't wait to see this thing again. On the scale of Transformers films, this might be the best one. I know I said it was the best one. And I feel like as a film, it very much is. It is a better film than the 86 movie. It is a better and more accessible film than the 2007 film, if only because the robots are characters and not set pieces. And that is a very big thing to me. And I think that's a very important thing for Transformers fandom as a whole. I want to be able to identify with the hero characters and not see them as just tools for the human characters. And it's not to be against human characters, I don't think, but these Transformers have more humanity to them than any human character in the Bay film. And then after that, and I like the non-Bay films. I like Bumblebee. I like Rise of the Beast, and I think those are both very good films. This is still better than both of those. Bumblebee is very cohesive and clear and concise and treats Bumblebee as a character, but is very small in terms of being a small film. It is a small story told in a small space. This is a very big, epic story told using just a handful of characters, which is a different vibe altogether. Plus, there is just more eye candy in this film than that one, or in Rise of the Beast, which I also very much enjoyed. So in wrapping up, it's kind of hard to wrap up a film that is just that good. If you weren't planning on seeing it, I hope I convinced you to go see it, even if I spoiled the crap out of it for you. When you do go see it, come back here. Tell me if I'm off base. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm right. Tell me what you liked or didn't like about the film. Comment if you're watching this on YouTube. Hunt me down on social media at TFU_info on Twitter. TFU.info, all one word, everywhere else. That would be Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram, Mastodon, and now Reddit. And of course on the web, www.tfu.info. I want to know what you're thinking about this film. Tell me your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this film. I hope you go see it. Vote with your wallet. Vote with your dollar. Let's make this film successful. Let's show the powers that be, because I think they have a good film on their hands. Let's show them that we see that and that we're there for that. And with that, I will wrap this up. This is TFU News and Views, special Transformers 1 review edition. I hope you enjoyed your time with me. Of course, if you want more, we're all over. As I mentioned in social media, I will also mention on Patreon, patreon.com/TFU.info. And of course, at my other podcast, Transformers University Podcast. Until then, I am your host, Anthony Brucali, owner, operator, madman behind TFU.info. Till next time, see ya.
From Cybertron's heart to the human race, we're tracking every move, keeping pace. New waves, new lines, every figure's a key. In the saga of Transformers, our legacy. TFU News and Views, where the story unfolds. And views, news and views. From the spark of creation to the tales untold. Extra, extra. Generations unite, in the fans we trust. TFU's got the news, breaking it for us. In every new saga where the legends swarm, we bring you the updates, keeping you informed. From Energon Fields to the Matrix's light, we're chronicling the legends day and night. TFU News and Views, where the story unfolds. And views, news and views. From the spark of creation to the tales untold. Extra, extra. Generations unite, in the fans we trust. TFU's got the news, breaking it for us. The crime beast wars or the latest arc, we're igniting the passion, lighting the spark. From toys to comics, movies to TV, we're shaping the legacy, come and see. In the echo of battle, in the calm after storms, we're mapping the journey in all its forms. From the golden age to the darkest hour, we'll transform your day with knowledge and power. TFU News and Views, where the story unfolds. And views, news and views. From the spark of creation to the tales untold. Extra, extra. Generations unite, in the fans we trust. TFU's got the news, breaking it for us. Transform and ascend as the legacy grows. TFU News and Views, where the history flows. We're driving the future with stories brand new. This is TFU.info, all for you.